Good afternoon, everyone. Really glad to have you with us today as we host this first installment of our 2020 Public Policy Speaker Series. I'm Matt Morrow with the Springfield Area Chamber of Commerce, welcoming you today. We had a couple of technical glitches, which I know you're beginning to probably become quite familiar with in this environment that we're in today, as you utilize technology in new ways as well. But we're set to go. We did have. Please forgive if you were one of the callers who had to disconnect and then reconnect back to the Zoom, but it looks like everything's in place now. We also will have, I want you to watch your email if you would, you'll be receiving an email from Lauren Musto just as we're getting started here if you haven't already, and that will have some slides for today's presentation. Those slides are really just arrived as we were getting started, and so we want to make sure that we make those available to you so you can follow along if you would like. And there's just going to be there will be some really excellent resources and background there for you as well. I'm so grateful that you're with us today. I know we're not in our usual setting, but I do want to just sincerely thank you all for being a part of this, and especially thank our sponsors as well for the Public Policy Speaker Series. Our presenting sponsor is Kutak Rock, and our spring sponsor for the series is Southwest Missouri Council of Governments. We are very appreciative of your support of the Chamber of Commerce, and that type of support really allows us to deliver this helpful and timely programming like today for our members. This is our first virtual public policy speaker series because, like so many events recently, things took a little bit of a different turn and looked different in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic, but we're so grateful to have the Missouri Department of Labor and Industrial Relations Director Anna Hugh with us today to provide an update for all of our members on the efforts and the effects of this statewide reopening effort, including the workforce implications for employers and individuals. I also want to thank Dolores Rose, who's the communications director for the Department of Labor. She's just been tremendously helpful, and she's listening in on the call today as well. We have a lot to cover today and a lot of questions for Dr. Hugh that many of you have already submitted. We'll try to get to as many of those as we can. And in addition, if you have a question that comes up during today's discussion, you can email those to Lauren Musto on our team at lmustoe, that's LMUSTOE, at springfieldchamber.com. That's LMUSTOE at springfieldchamber.com, and we'll do our very best to get to those as soon as possible. As I mentioned, we have a very special guest with us today. Hope you'll take a moment to read Dr. Hugh's full bio, Director Hugh's full bio on the Chamber Coronavirus webpage, because it is quite impressive. So if you haven't seen it yet, springfieldchamber.com/coronavirus. She was our director. Again, our Director of Labor was, before coming to us here in Missouri, had a full career of public service at the state and federal level, including getting her start serving for Illinois Governor Jim Edgar, serving as the U.S. Department of Labor during President George W. Bush's administration, and serving as Assistant Director and later as Acting Director of the Illinois Department of Labor, just to name a few of her accomplishments. We're so grateful that she's brought her talents and expertise to Missouri. Even before the crisis that we're in right now, we benefited greatly from her leadership. And I do want to take this moment before we begin to just give you a big thank you, Director Hugh, for your service to the state. You're just doing a tremendous job, and these are certainly unprecedented times. So thank you so much for your service to our state.
Thank you very much. Honored to join you all.
Absolutely. And of course, for those who have been following this, I know you know that throughout this pandemic, she has shown immense knowledge, skill, dedication to Missourians as they face unprecedented implications of this virus. And we're just so grateful for your leadership and partnership with the Springfield Chamber on behalf of our members. So officially, that's kind of the introduction, but I just want to officially welcome you, Dr. Hugh, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Well, you know, I have a special place in my heart for Springfield, not just because you have wonders of wildlife there, which is a tremendous tourist draw and just really awe-inspiring when you go in. I thought we were doing a Zoom video today. I wanted to be in front of I have a metal map of the state of Missouri hanging in my office, and every place I go, I try to put a magnet on there. So because I was in Leadership Missouri's class in 2018, I was able to join the Springfield Chamber when we visited the Springfield area and benefited from your knowledge and your insights over there, but was really quite delighted to be able to, again, become educated and better acquainted with the communities out there and your needs and your contributions to the state economy overall. So thank you so much for what you do every day for Missourians in your area, but overall for the state as well. And having these opportunities to engage with you and get feedback from you are really very important. And so let me just kind of address some just baseline information that I think would be helpful to you to get context with kind of how unprecedented this unemployment situation, just the economic downturn itself. It is really the first time in U.S. history where we have had significant economic downturn that is primarily due to a public health issue. And so we've never really had this impact at such a high level before. And because it is unusual in that sense, because it stems from public health and the concerns related to that, it's also, we've broken a number of other records, which I wish we hadn't, which in March of 2020, nationally, we had the single highest month increase since January of 1975. And then in April, we actually broke the all-time record back to all the way to January 1948, when we started taking records on a monthly basis of unemployment. And so, again, very historic times, and we tried to do our best to adjust to the needs of the community, to citizens out there, really ramping up our services and resources to help folks in this time of need, both employers and workers. And so, as we look to meet those challenges, the slide deck that's being circulated, again, just sharing the trajectory in terms of the second slide, really talking about what did monthly unemployment look like. And we really talk about this pandemic starting essentially March 15th for us in terms of the unemployment program. But on slide 2, I did include some stats, so we have a point of comparison. In February 2020, the national unemployment was at 3.5%. And then if you look through March, it trended up to 4.4, but then you have this huge jump nationally to 14.7% in April of 2020. In Missouri, while February and March tracked pretty close to the national average, I'm very thankful that the April 2020 numbers for Missouri's monthly unemployment was nowhere near 14.7%. We were at 9.7%. So thank goodness for that. But if you look at the initial claims filed, again, the trend was just enormous. February, and this is just regular unemployment insurance, so this is not even with the new three federal programs that we have. We had 11,650 for February. In March, we jumped to almost 200,000 at 196,290, and we're just short of 300,000 now in April of 2020. And that's just, again, initial regular claims filed. So that doesn't include the federal pandemic programs. Some additional context for you all too is that essentially these volumes, it took us about 52 weeks to get to this level, which, collectively, if we look at the data from 2009, 8, and 9, at the height of the recession, took us about 52 weeks to get to 615,000. In the matter of basically 9 weeks, we are up to like 540,000. So it's really quite historic. Another point of comparison, in the last recession, the average weekly benefit paid was $250 plus the federal supplement was $25. Whereas today, the weekly average benefit is $273 and the federal supplement is $600. So quite a contrast there. In the last recession, people had up to 99 weeks of benefits that were available to them. Currently, what we're trending, especially if we do trigger on to extended benefits later this summer, it will be probably up to 59 weeks. So again, huge points of comparison for us, but in a very short period of time, we essentially ramped up pretty quickly in terms of the volume and claims, as well as the calls and emails and contact with us. On the third slide, we do take a look at, again, you can kind of see the ebb and flow up and down of the claims on a daily period. And if you look at April 11th, that was a really sharp increase, and that was essentially we got a number of federal programs up and running at that point. So that was one reason why those claims went up, and we continue to see that. The reason that's important to take a look at it, if you see the yellow line, you can maybe barely see the red line, but our average, so the red line is basically what we normally would do during that time frame for those weeks. And the yellow line is the height of the Great Recession, so the last recession that we had, which was a little over 3,000 a day. And so when you're looking at well over 50,000 claims in a single day, that's, again, a huge jump in terms of workload and need for the citizens. On the fourth slide, I do talk a bit, again, the reason why we look at Missouri's continuing unemployment weekly request for payment is that it essentially shows us how many people continue to need those benefits. So initial claims we expect will plateau at a certain point because people will have filed their claims and will be in the midst of either already getting paid or resolving maybe potential issues so that they can get paid or they're deemed ineligible, right? So not everybody who files an initial claim is eligible, but this slide itself, again, we'll be monitoring this particular number pretty closely. So every week on Thursday, those weekly numbers will come out. We release information not only on the weekly number of initial claims filed, but we also release numbers on the request for continued payment. And so that will be a number that we'll be looking at very closely as we continue to reopen the economy and see how that tracks, as well as, you know, overlaying that with potential reinfection or any sort of flare-ups in terms of the public health concern. So the next one is, I think there was some interest in terms of what do the Missouri numbers look like by industry. Not surprising, the top industry is accommodations and food services, and then healthcare. But then, you know, administrative and support and waste management remediation, those are kind of tied at 5% apiece. You know, accommodations and food services at 17%, healthcare at 8%. But then construction, arts and entertainment, and recreation were at 3% each as well. The bulk of the other numbers really are a mix, and so none of them really are ebbing much above the 1% mark, and so there's a lot of detail that goes into those other industry numbers, but just wanted to highlight some of the top industries for y'all. Something that I, think would be an interesting context for you all to consider as economic developers and businesses is this recently released University of Chicago study, so that's the next slide, on U.S. unemployment insurance replacement rates during the pandemic. And this is really the first comprehensive study that's been released that has taken a look at kind of the notion of, well, okay, people are getting unemployment right now, but what does it really mean in terms of how much money are they getting and how does that compare to what they were getting before? So highlights of that study, if you flip to the next slide, is essentially we've gotten confirmation through this study that 2/3 of the people getting unemployment benefits are earning more than from their jobs. And 20% of these unemployed workers are getting at least twice the amount in benefits that they would used to make in their work. Specifically for Missouri, we have a 152 to 161% median benefit replacement, but it's lower than some of our neighboring states like Kentucky, Arkansas, Iowa, and Oklahoma. I have included links for y'all to go see this particular article that I referenced, but also the study itself. So the next slide talks about national benefit replacement rate. Again, because I know you guys are interested in some of those industries, you can take a look at basically how much money they're getting under the CARES Act versus without the CARES Act. So that blue line is essentially what a state benefit would be. And then the teal colored line under the CARES Act is most of these individuals, if they are actually employees and receiving regular UI benefits, this would account for the supplemental, federal supplemental that's being paid, or if they're if they're, individuals who are getting the PUA or pandemic unemployment assistance, this particular graph doesn't account for that. So if these are really individuals that are counted as employees. If you go to the next slide, we talk about median benefit replacements by state. And if you look at where Missouri sits kind of towards the center there, right next to the very dark Kentucky block, we are in that latter or upper half of state payments that are having a replacement rate that is quite high compared to what people actually make normally. So again, I do have the actual study link there, so y'all can go and take a look at that, but this was just released last week. And then we have some additional resources that are available to you all that I have on the very last slide, which really, talks about Governor Parsons' Show Me Strong Recovery Plan and the 4 pillars there. We have the MODOLIR COVID-19 Frequently Asked Questions webpage, and so we have everything from unemployment to workers' comp, as well as workplace discrimination, workplace safety, youth employment, and wage and hour issues there. The unemployment virtual assistant chatbot, which again, it's a chatbot, so, but we have had nearly 200,000 interactions on the chatbot, and it's been well over, I think, 82 or 83% accurate in terms of its responses of answering individuals' questions who interact with that. The Division of Employment Security has put up a link and a portal for employers to report employee work refusals. If you go to our main webpage, labor.mo.gov, there's a button on that page you can press for that. That's also where you can find the unemployment virtual assistant. There's a button on that page as well. And that there is also a link to the frequently asked questions page. There's a banner that you can click for that. And so again, I had drawn people's attention to the employee reporting employee work refusals. We're actually going to be adding the functionality as well, I think by end of week, to that link to allow for employers who have gotten PPP loans and are now paying back wages to employees to also report who those employees are, because those individuals who did get unemployment benefits for those weeks that are getting back paid will have to repay those weeks plus a $600 federal supplement if they got that. And the sooner we can get that information out to them, we're hoping, fingers crossed, that the less likely they are to have spent it all and won't be in a deficit in terms of having to repay that to us. Because employees who got those benefits and do not repay them before the next time they need that benefit, any sort of future benefit will be decreased by the repayment required before we can issue future benefits. And the last thing I'll highlight is that our Labor Standards Division workplace safety programs are scheduling virtual visits, so particularly our on-site safety and consultation program, which has a grant from OSHA to help small employers, particularly those 250 or less, to do workplace safety evaluations and improvements. It is separate from the enforcement side of OSHA. So again, this is a great resource. We are now starting in-person visits as well, but we do try to start as much as we can virtually. And it's really meant to help small employers prepare for reopening. And that's been a big push and focus of the on-site program. So with that, I am open to any questions that y'all might have, and I know that you have quite a few, so we'll head into that.
Well, Director, thank you so much for the update. I'm learning a lot even as you walk through that, and we feel like we've been immersed in this for weeks now, and I guess have to a certain extent. I guess I'd like to, if it's okay, maybe start with a couple of those last points that you made, just to make sure that everybody's clear on it. You talked a little bit about the interaction between small businesses who may have received a Paycheck Protection Program loan and employees who maybe they've laid off or had a situation where they maybe were collecting unemployment. Could you walk us through that again one more time? What employers need to be thinking about in that regard?
So basically, individuals who are now getting, and we put a press release out, I think it was last Saturday. So if you go to our labor.mo.gov webpage and click on news, that press release will also be there. And it essentially gives instructions to employees to understand that they must report wages, back wages that they were paid as part of any sort of, they have to report any sort of back wages that were paid for them, period. And then we at the department will then redetermine whether or not they were eligible for any benefits. If in fact they were not, they made too much, and the threshold is generally $384 a week, then we would then let them know that they received an overpayment through no fault of their own, right? And then the amount that they would have to repay. Now for employers, the link that I put on that last page in particular is meant to be helpful to you all to, again, facilitate the reporting of the fact that these employees were paid back wages and for what dates, right, amounts and what dates. And then it will help us kind of start that process in reaching out. So if you look at our FAQs pages, it's numbers, I think, 16 through 21. So 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21 address some commonly asked questions related to the PPP loan program. But again, you know, we have to take into account what those back wages would have been to recalculate whether or not they would have been qualified for any benefits during those weeks. And then if in fact they were not, then they have to repay that.
So in essence, it can be a fairly complicated process, but the idea here is that you're only supposed to utilize one of these benefits at a time for the same purpose, right? You can't make money on the deal that way. And
yeah, there's no double dipping.
Right,
I mean, because at the end of the day, the UI trust fund is paid by employers, and we as the department are trustees for this trust fund and have the fiduciary duty of making sure that any payments that were made out, while at the time they would have been proper, because of new information we receive now, we are obligated to do that. And frankly, the U.S. Department of Labor's Inspector General has been very, very, very candid with us to say that they will be doing random audits, and they will be looking at self-certification as well as some of these other aspects as well. And so we really want to inform workers as best as we can to be prepared for that and to make sure that you're not, hopefully we won't be having a lot of, individuals who pay down mortgages or bought a new car or paid down their debt. But, because we are obligated under the responsibilities of the trust fund to collect those funds. Yeah.
So I want to come back to that in just a moment, but just to remind people, the FAQ that Director Hugh provided on her slides has lots of great information about that. And for those on the call who are accustomed to coming to our coronavirus webpage, resources page for members, that's springfieldchamber.com/coronavirus. And this, the news release that your department issued last week is also posted there too. So hope people will be well informed about how to make sure that you're doing everything in just the proper way. You mentioned the trust fund, and I think there, we do have some questions about that. I'd be very interested in your perspective on how you expect it to hold up. Is it, what are the implications? Are there implications long-term for employers related to that? What should we be thinking about in this moment a little bit more long-term?
Well, we just want to make sure that, number one is that the way the state of Missouri unemployment insurance program was set up and is in statute is very much that, we want Missouri businesses to hold on to as much of their funds to invest into their businesses when times are good, right? And so the way that program is structured and the statute is written, essentially every recession that we've had that we have needed to take a loan, we have, and we have the authority to do that. The governor delegates that authority to the department director. But of course, I would never take a hundreds or billions of dollar loan without talking to the governor first and making sure we had his blessing. So we are tracking the trust fund very closely. As of May 18th, the trust fund balance was approximately $858 million. And that includes recent deposits from the first quarter of employee tax returns too. So, during the COVID-19 event, I think the highest weekly benefit we've paid out from the UI trust fund has been about $75 million. And assuming, again, no new unemployed tax revenues are deposited in the trust fund, we're looking at a weekly benefit payout increasing to about $85 million per week. And at that level, it will take probably at least another 10 weeks before we're in a position where we would need to exercise our federal Title 12 advancement, so the loan, right? So that really wouldn't be until sometime in July when we would actually do that. Now, we may go through the paperwork of requesting the authority to, it's like getting pre-approved for a home loan. So we sometimes will start that paperwork early because we have a very small window of time to trigger the request for the loan. But, again, we track it every day. We make sure that, the funds that we're paying out, again, are reconciled very well. And that's another reason why making sure individuals who may have been overpaid through no fault of their own understand the importance of repaying those funds, because it allows us to stretch out the time to when we actually need to ask for that loan.
Okay. It's I think that's really great insight that I think people are curious about, but they just haven't given themselves time to really think through what some of the longer term implications are here for the system even. And I will also just add here, if I could, we may have skipped over this and shouldn't have done that, but I think there are still states that are struggling with standing up their methods for processing and utilizing the new unemployment claims and the federal. We were on that in Missouri almost immediately, and it's kind of like not noticing when you have a great umpire, but that, I mean, that's not easy. And again, there are states that are still don't have that figured out. So kudos to your team and everybody involved. That had to be I can't imagine what that undertaking was like.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, I actually wore red today to celebrate the local team from Springfield, but you don't have video today, so you can't see my red suit. But and so I appreciate the umpire comment. But I think again, it's a real credit to not just the department, but to the business community overall. When we went and asked for, I think a surcharge, I can't remember the years, but we had a 3-year period before we actually started modernization. I think it was in 2013. For 3 years, we were able to have a surcharge, which basically funded, I think, about $40 million towards a $48 million price tag to modernize our system. We did get a grant for the other, I think, $8 million, but that amount has now paid off in a tremendous way, because again, we have been one of the first states to be able to launch a lot of the federal programs that, again, the system was not envisioned to do some of these things in quite the way, and we've been able to adapt it. We actually share our system and our base code with 6 other states. And so as a consortium, so the other states are Mississippi, Maine, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Wyoming. And so those states, we've all banded together during this time, and when we've been able to make an improvement, we've been able to share some of those ideas and brainstorm with them on how to kind of put solutions in place. So that, again, a real kudos everyone. And just so if in case you didn't know, we did have what was our bill that was this last year? I think one of the automation adjustment. So you'll be hearing stuff in the upcoming legislative session about an automation adjustment, which supports, again, the continued improvement of the UI system and allows for us, again, not only just to maintain it, but continue to innovate it and be able to address circumstances like COVID-19. So we have the resources and the capabilities available. So you might hear that again. We put that forward, I think, the last 2 legislative cycles, but that would be something that we would certainly ask for the business community support, because we've already seen what a benefit it is when we are in that sort of position.
That sounds great. I would love to learn more about it. Director, we have a lot of questions here from employers, and some of them are kind of in the kind of right down on the ground in terms of what we're dealing
Okay.
with. So I'll run through them as quickly as we can. I know we don't have unlimited time, but I want to try to capture these. I know that at the beginning of the expanded unemployment benefits authorized by the CARES Act, that one of the things that was sort of to the benefit of people who suddenly found themselves out of work was that they weren't the requirement to seek work on a weekly basis was waived
Hmm.
in the process of receiving these benefits. I guess I would ask, we're kind of hearing some different people are starting to talk about different things on this. Is that requirement still waived? Is there a point at which a requirement to look for work returns, and what does that look like?
Well, number one, we never said it'd be waived forever. So it
Mm-hmm.
was temporary, and it's meant to be temporary. So normally, employers are allowed to ask for 8 weeks in terms of a temporary layoff for their individuals. And we generally, if they send us a mass claim for that temporary layoff and say, for this population of employees that we've laid off, generally can ask for, like, you establish a recall date at about 8 weeks. We have, on request, extended that for some of those employers for 16 weeks. And this is, again, under regular UI. So for us, we do have some flexibility, but it's not unlimited.
Okay.
And so we do take a look at the overall, public health situation, the economic climate. And, again, we do not foresee this going on forever. And we do monitor it quite quickly, but we will give plenty of notice to all employers and workers when that waiver of the work search is no longer in effect.
Okay.
And when we do take that off, primarily it will be to, again, encourage workers, if they are attached to an employer, hopefully the employer is getting prepared to reopen, right? And so that worker will go back. But once that work search requirement goes back into place, that worker should then be looking for additional work or other work, because they could be making more money, frankly, or doing other things. And so we really do want to encourage those workers to, again, get back into the workforce.
Okay. So a couple of related questions to that, and I know you've heard these questions really from the very beginning. We have two. Relates to what you shared earlier in terms of the percentage of previous wages that are being earned and claimed an unemployment benefit. So if an employer has temporarily furloughed or laid off some of their staff, and they begin reopening and would like to bring some of those people back, and these are people who are making more on unemployment than the job that they would return to pays. Is that if an offer is made, do they need to accept it? Under what circumstances are they allowed to refuse that offer and still claim benefits? Could you walk us through kind of what we should know about that?
Well, I would say, number one, I think we've been very clear and consistent. And in fact, even U.S. Treasury Secretary Mnuchin yesterday said that, if employers offer employees suitable work to return to, and they do not, then there are no more unemployment benefits. Mm-hmm. None under regular and none under any of the federal programs that have been created under this pandemic, right? So that, I think we're trying to be very consistent on that. Number two, that's why if you look at that additional resources page, we do have this portal set up now for employers to report to us employees who have refused to return to work, right? So just as we tried to make it easy for employers to provide us with a mass claim so that, we knew that there was no protest, at least from them as an employer, for someone's unemployment claim. Again, the employer in that sense is taking care of their employee under those circumstances. We also are trying to make it easy for employers to let us know, hey, I've offered this individual work and that individual has refused to return to work. Now, there are some circumstances that we do allow for good cause, and we do have those up on the FAQs. If you look under FAQs 1 and 2, there's a there is information both on quits and then also refusal to return to work.
Okay. So as a general rule, if an offer is made, it needs to be accepted or the unemployment benefits don't continue. And for any exceptions, they can take a look at that link on the slides as well.
Correct. And I
Okay.
would say, we need employers to be good partners with us on this. We want to be supportive of employers who are trying to encourage and have offered opportunities for employees to go back to work. So we've tried to make that reporting portal pretty easy to use. And so certainly if there's feedback that it's not easy to use, do let us know. But, again, the sooner we know, the sooner we can, reevaluate that individual's claim and notify them whether or not, they are eligible any further. And so, again, I think we ask the business community to be good partners with us on that.
Great, you bet. Are there circumstances under which, for example, an employee who's laid off or furloughed, if they reach that point where they're required to make a good faith effort to find work, and they get an offer from a different employer, are they now obligated to take that offer as well, in order, or do they have the option of declining that and continuing benefits?
Again, you can't force anybody to take a job, but
Right.
If in fact an employer offers work like that, they could report it to us, and it could, we do have a button for reporting fraud as well. So, there are ways to contact the department if in fact you feel individuals are continuing to take in benefits for which they're not eligible for.
Okay. Now the flip side of that, of course, is, and this was actually a version of this question that I had not heard until a little bit more recently talking to an employer. If we go back in time before all of this, you know as well as anybody that the biggest challenge facing employers was a lack of available workforce. Unemployment rates were incredibly low, and and so there are some employers who were operating, maybe it's a 150 person operation, but they've been operating 20 or 30 people short for some time anyway. And in some cases, their business has continued to work. And so if those employers would like to go out, say a manufacturer wants to go out and try to find another 20 or 30 people to work on the front lines of that operation, and that job is pays less than the benefits that many people are receiving right now. I guess one of the real challenges that I hadn't contemplated before is, how does an employer go out and recruit people right now if they're recruiting for those jobs that are in that $30,000 to $40,000 a year range? Is there any? I guess this is not so much a director of labor question as it is just a good suggestion from a highly qualified person. What do you think?
In the context of workforce development overall, this was one of the things that Missouri, along with a number of other states, really talked to the U.S. Department of Labor, because they were having some pretty serious conversations with both the House and Senate when they were debating what to do with this particular federal supplement that was being paid. Should it be a flat fee? How much should it be? Should it be rate? And part of the reason they came up with a flat number was because most systems aren't modernized to do something on a scale. So, but we had always cautioned, we're like, hey, last recession, you only had a $25 a week supplement. We understand that you're trying to be more generous this time, but our suggestion was not anywhere near $600. So, in a way, I think the push by some members of Congress to increase the minimum wage, this was their way to at least temporarily do it and kind of circumvent the minimum wage process. Now, that's me, Anna Hugh, talking to you as someone who looks at both the labor side of it and the workforce development side and sees the impact on that on a national level. So, that is why we fought so hard for at least a hard stop in terms of a date when those benefits would be paid out. So July 25th is the last week that you can file and be eligible for that $600 federal supplement. Certainly there are conversations in Congress now about extending that, but my understanding it is not, there's not a lot of momentum to extend the $600. It is much more a momentum behind extending a federal supplement of some kind, because frankly, I think in the short 10 weeks that we've had this in place already, they realize that it is a real downside to getting the economy going. And across the country, every state is going to be opening at different points. Different counties, different municipalities are going to be opening at different rates, phased in. So I think hindsight for them, they realize to some extent that it is a real challenge in terms of reopening the economy by putting this federal supplement out there. So what I would say is, for the time being, before that July 25th date, is you're going to have to now compete with the federal government in terms of wages, right? Because the federal government is now paying this benefit to folks not to work. And in fact, it is an artificial increase of the minimum wage. They've kind of circumvented that process right now. But, you all have the ability to call your congressional members to voice that concern, to say, hey, look, as you're talking about any sort of federal supplement going forward, please take this into consideration, that you're essentially increasing what we have to pay at an hourly rate without, the debate on minimum wage overall. And they've wrapped it up now into this kind of public health debate, and so it's really going to have to take a concerted effort. I think we on the state administrator level have been very vocal with our federal partners on that. I know at least there were many late nights where I currently am the president of both the National Association of State Workforce Agencies and the National Association of Government Labor Officials. And we, both of those groups were very much involved in the conversations to say that we don't want this sort of federal supplement at this level, because we already foresaw it being a real disincentive to return to work. Anyway, it didn't pull through at the last minute, because I think the real push was to get also a really big stimulus package for businesses as well with the PPP program. And so that's kind of where that fell. But, again, those two programs were rolled out simultaneously without much conversation to each other. And so we're now also dealing with the aftermath of just making sure that employers who got a PPP loan and are paying employees back wages, that they need to also help us inform their employees of why they need to report those wages. Because even if they think they can skirt by it now, we do a quarterly report that runs payroll records submitted by employers against the pool of claims and the claimants that are listed, in terms of payouts. And so if we don't see you now, we'll see you in the next quarter when that information comes in. And again, that is one of those safeguards that the Office of Inspector General will be looking at as well, in terms of how well are we doing in cross-matching those two populations.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned potential next phase of federal action on this. Of course, we hear rumblings about what that might look like or what might or might not be included. I guess I'd be very interested in your perspective about what, are there next best steps that should be under consideration right now at a federal level to help with what the next phase will look like?
Well, certainly we've had a lot of conversation with USDOL in terms of using the shared work program to really allow for employers, again, to phase back into some level of operation, which, again, kind of shares the burden of regular pay to employees and their benefits on the employer side, but then also being able to supplement with some unemployment compensation. And that would also then qualify them for any sort of federal supplement. So we feel that that type of support would be very helpful to continue in that area. There is a lot of discussion in terms of how do we now start incentivizing work. Again, a lot of different ideas and plans towards that, everything from increasing apprenticeships to, again, figuring out some level of additional stimulus back to back to households rather than on a per worker category, but per household category. So, there's a number of different things going, but I think the one consistent thing that we, at least, labor departments and other workforce agencies have really talked about is, the two pieces of unemployment and workforce development have to work hand in hand in order to really get us to recover, right? And so you can't overfund one side and neglect the other side. And so, incentivizing people to get back into training programs, apprenticeships, continued education, those are things that, again, we're really trying to make sure that we illustrate that in our Show Me recovery plans as well. And so, the cabinet and all the agencies, all 16 cabinet agencies are very active every day. I'll say I start a morning call every day at about 7:30 with my cabinet colleagues, and we talk about kind of what each day looks for us and what are kind of the top priorities. But we also have teams throughout the day that are meeting very specifically, not just on public health, but also on the economic recovery side. And so, those are things that we're doing here at the state, and we are certainly in very direct and consistent communication with our federal congressional members as well, and particularly the two senators' offices.
You mentioned the cabinet. Governor Parson speaks so highly about his cabinet, and we agree here. We've had great experiences, not only with directors of the various departments of the state government, but with their teams as well. And so I just want to say you and your peers are doing remarkable work for the state of Missouri. And I know that the best leaders always use challenging times as opportunities for learning and growth. So with that in mind, one of the questions I would have for you is, what lessons or experiences is your department taking from this crisis as you go into the recovery phase and beyond? What out of all of this are you taking to make your department, your people better?
Well, I think more than anything is, you have to face these challenges and really think back, like, who do you need to rely on? Who's important to you, right? And so, our biggest lesson learned is that by forging the sort of relationships and the trust that we have amongst the cabinet and our colleagues across the board, we really are working better together. And that's a theme that, my coming to the Missouri Department of Labor was something that I didn't see was really working well across our different divisions. And so we've really worked on that, like, workplace safety and workers' comp. Could we have better shared our workers' comp data with our workplace safety folks so that we could have prevented the workplace injuries to begin with, right? That wasn't being done before. And so, again, those are opportunities that we have certainly taken advantage of in terms of using data better. But I think the biggest thing that we've demonstrated to ourselves throughout the response and recovery efforts is that the things that the way we were working before and the way we talked about how technology and just consumer and citizen expectations, like how are we going to meet that in this new modern age? Those were all things that we were told that we couldn't get done, or it would take years to get done. And I will tell you that within a month's time, we were able to get certain things done that were just absolutely amazing. I mean, not only did we have a modernized UI system and we took in more claims in a 4-week period than we had for the entire year of 2019, that is amazing. But the fact that we also set up, 60% of our staff across the division to be working remotely, and a fairly significant portion of our call center and our employment security team can also do that remotely as well. And again, things that people said just couldn't be done or would be too costly or we just didn't have the will, we essentially were able to, put those naysayers aside and really show them, for all intents and purposes, that not only do we need to do them, we must do them, and we must do them immediately and as efficiently and effectively as we can. I think, our public service delivery methods have certainly started to catch up with what I think private sector consumer experiences have been. Later this week, we hope to have a claims tracker in place on our website, which is very similar to what the IRS, the federal IRS claims tracker will be like. And we're hoping that will really reduce some of the calls and inquiries about where's my money. I mean, that's still kind of the top call that comes in. But, again, being able to put IT resources in place, being able to have effective delivery of services to citizens while we have a significant portion of our workforce working from home. And it presents us challenges in like, well, now we've really got to go back and rethink what are our policies and processes that going forward, what's going to be that new normal, right? How much of this is going to continue? And we know we'll be responding to COVID-19 in a number of ways and for an extended period of time. So, but how are we going to take the lessons learned from this to be prepared for whatever the next circumstances, whether it's a public health situation or something else that impacts the state's citizens? And so I think it's opened a lot of people's minds to the possibilities of what we can do. And it's actually, won some people over to the idea that, why not government? Why can't we run an operation that is similar to the best organizations out there in the public sector? And I think we've made some good inroads on that.
Well, I would certainly agree with that. And Director Hugh, I'm so grateful for the insights that you're providing, perspective that you've provided today for our members as they navigate through this crisis as well. And at each of our gatherings for this public policy speaker series event, I always try to wrap up with the same question of every guest we have, and I want to continue that here on our call today. So as you think about our state's future and our country's future, and especially in the context of this COVID-19 lens that we all have now, but as you think about our future, what do you think is our state's greatest opportunity moving through this pandemic into recovery? And then I'll follow up with what keeps you up at night. But let's start with what do you think is our greatest opportunity?
Well, I think our greatest opportunity is to really just, again, support and just really celebrate the workforce and our citizens here in this heartland. I mean, I think, if you look at some of the recovery efforts on, and frankly, the public health efforts on either coast, I think we are actually doing quite well here in the Midwest. And, strong, hardworking Missourians are really just, we're steadfast, we're resolute, and really nothing keeps us down. We're just, let's deal with the next crisis, let's figure that out, let's learn from that, let's move on to the next thing. I really have no doubt that that Missourians have the sort of work ethic and resolve to face whatever new challenges may come up. But certainly, these are historic times, and I think one of our biggest concerns going forward is in the level of effort that we have put into facing the current pandemic. What is that cost? What is that cost to the economy in terms of dollars and repaying the sort of debt that we may have taken on by our response today? But what is the cost in terms of potential social distancing, in terms of building relationships and engagement? It certainly has challenged us to figure other ways. My parents, who are close to 80, just did a group FaceTime with us earlier this week to celebrate my niece's 18th birthday. And I was like, well, gosh darn it, if they can figure it out, I'm sure we can get many generations to kind of do that. But, again, I think for them in particular, this is what we're living now, and the use of our technology is sci-fi to them, right? I mean, it was like the Jetsons. It was like Lost in Space. You're talking on a video to somebody else in real time and having a conversation. And so, let's not lose sight of the fact that at the end of the day, it is about relationships. It's about being able to develop those relationships, and in times of crisis, being able to rely on them, and being able to pull together and really face those challenges, but also seek those new opportunities for us as well. And so really, I think we need to take the time, because, I think, you asked about what keeps me up at night. And I think what keeps me up at night is, not just my daughter's generation, but my daughter's children and their children. How long are we going to be paying for this? And, how can we continue to come up with solutions that do not overburden our future generations with the decisions that we make today that face the challenges that we have today? So So that's, I kind of pre-answered your question, but
Wow, that's great. I'm glad. What a perspective. So thoughtful. So good. I wish we could do this. I actually wish we could do this for another hour. I know we can't, and I know we will be respectful of your time, Director Hugh, but unfortunately our time is up. We couldn't get to all the questions out there, but we do appreciate you joining us today. And so as we wrap up the program, I want to share just a few important things. First, Director Anna Hugh, for your expertise and perspective on the call today. I also want to thank you for just for the tremendous work of your team. We mentioned Dolores Rose earlier, but Ben Terrell is a great partner for us and a great advocate, obviously in the Capitol and other ways on your behalf. But more than anything, just to thank you for being with us today. Thank you so much.
it's a delight. And please do let us know what we can do to be more helpful to you all as well.
We sure will. We'll just stay in touch all the way along this process. So thanks again also to Kutak Rock and to Southwest Missouri Council of Governments for sponsoring today's event. I want to thank all of our members for joining us today and for your questions. We know you're working hard to deal with a lot of uncertainties right now, and our priority continues to be bringing you the timely information and trusted resources you need to get through this crisis, and learning from you and acting as your advocate along the way to try to make sure you get what you need to reopen as thoroughly and quickly and safely as possible in a way that helps your business thrive as we come out of it. I would encourage you to please keep visiting our website at www.springfieldchamber.com/coronavirus for new information every day on resources to help you and your business, and to just please stay tuned for upcoming events in the works as well. There will be more of that also. I would also encourage you to please reach out to us with your COVID-19 concerns, experiences, and challenges, as your feedback is directly informing us and informing our advocacy efforts on your behalf about what you need most during this period of response and recovery. In some cases, we're able to connect you directly with resources, which we always love to do, and there are a lot of them. It's a maze to navigate right now, so we want to help you with that. In other cases, we learn from you and quickly are able to get your voice to the table to help shape our future as we work our way out of this. You can share your feedback with us at the email address covid19info@springfieldchamber.com. Again, that's covid19info@springfieldchamber.com. And as our community has begun to reopen, many of you are working tirelessly right now and very creatively. You are innovating every single day to meet the current moment. And I am always impressed and somehow continually surprised by the resiliency, the innovation, and spirit of our business community. And this unique time is no exception. In fact, it's a time when all of that has really risen to the top like no other time. You are doing amazing work. And as you meet this current challenge, just please know that we're here to support you. We're here to do all we can to help you come out of this unprecedented time successfully and be strong as you do it. We're so grateful for your membership, for your engagement, and I want to thank you for being a part of the Springfield Area Chamber of Commerce.